Why did Tyr allow Fenrir to bite off his hand during Ragnarok? The answer lies in a secret pact that redefined the war against the gods. A god's hand lost not to ensuring the honor, but to fracture Asgard's unity. Bite off his hand tears during silence fed Ragnarok the wolf's hunger, ensuring the Aesir would crumble from within. What price a realm's survival, if bought with betrayal? Burned not the jot on teeth, gods hid Tyr's hand in the fire. Burned not the jot, gods hid Tyr's hand in the fire. Severed hand was not a sacrifice but a signal. Odin, ever the scholar of shadows, wore Tyr's face to bind Fenrir. The true Tyr had already turned his back on Asgard's false war. Honesty is a weapon in a hall of liars. Tyr knew the real enemy was not the Jotnar but the Allfather's endless hunger for manipulated endings. His silence was a dagger. When Fenrir's jaws closed, Tyr's pact with the void ensured the wolf's power would shatter Odin's puppets first. The 9 realms did not fall to brute force. Ethi collapsed under the weight of a god's stolen identity. What does a realm become when its savior is a ghost in the machine? Tyr's chains were not forged in battle. Odin bound him in a cryptic cell, a punishment for refusing to stain his hands with Aesir atrocities. The god of war became a god of silence. When Fenrir's jaws closed, Tyr let them knowing his severed hand would become a key, a cipher, a signal. Odin wore his face like a mask in Ragnarok's chaos, weaving lies through the smoke. The 9 realms burned, blind to the thief masquerading as a martyr. Tyr's absence was no absence at all. His sacrifice was a trap, a hollow gesture to lure the true enemy from the shadows. What does a realm become when its savior is a ghost in the machine? The answer bleeds in the empty socket where Tyr's hand once was, a pact unspoken, a war rerouted. The cosmos bent not by heroism, but by the quiet weight of a god who knew his chains were a throne in disguise. The Eddas tell of a god's hand lost to a wolf's jaw, a tale of restraint, a price paid to bind chaos. But Santa Monica's saga carves deeper. Tyr's missing limb is not a symbol, it is a scar from a different war. One fought in shadows, not chains. Why does the game omit the bite? Why erase the wound that sealed Tyr's name? In myth, his sacrifice bought time. In this reimagined prophecy, his silence buys something darker. The Eddas framed him as martyr. The saga frames him as architect. The old stories cling to heroism. The new ones peel it back. Tyr did not offer his hand to Fenrir. He let the wolf take it. A gesture not of courage, but of calculation. A god trading flesh for leverage. His missing hand was not a loss, it was a key. The Santa Monica version keeps the wolf, keeps the storm, but it strips away the act that defined Tyr. Why? Because the truth fractures the narrative. If Tyr's sacrifice was not a choice, but a betrayal, then who was he betraying? The Aesir. The 9 realms, or a force older than the Norns, loom. The prophecy's bones remain, the outcome altered. Ragnarok's gears turn, but the hand that set them in motion was never Fenrir's. It was Tyr's all along. Chains flesh, not iron but time. Tyr's handless wrist, a glistening stump, pulsed with the rod of betrayal. Odin's shadow did not merely fall, it carved. The Allfather, master of lies, did not slay Tyr, he hollowed him. Hollowed his name, his throne, his very breath, until the god of law became a whisper in the dark. And the Aesir. Blind fools, they bowed to the impostor, a puppet with Tyr's face and Odin's poison in its veins. The real Tyr was not dead. He was buried in hell's frost, bound by runes only the Norns could undo. But the Norns are silent here. Their threads were cut long ago, snipped by the same hand that mimicked sacrifice. When Tyr emerged, his eyes burned with the memory of chains. Too late, the battle was lost, the Bifrost shattered. The 9 realms teetered on a blade's edge, not from Fenrir's jaws, but from the void left by Tyr's absence. What did Odin hide? A truth sharper than Gungnir. The Ragnarok we know is a fiction. The real war was fought in shadows, where Tyr's liberation became the final move in a game older than Yggdrasil. The 9 realms were never meant to fall, they were meant to be remade, and Tyr's hand. It was never Fenrir's bite that severed it. It was the moment Odin claimed his identity, pruning the only god who knew the roots of the world tree. The Aesir rage now, they curse Odin's name, but their anger is a mirror. For in freeing Tyr they unleashed a god who remembers the truth. the 9 realms were never saved, they were sacrificed. And Tyr, the handless god, is the only one who can undo what was done, or finish it. What waits in the frost where Tyr was buried, not a hero, a reckoning. The axe fell, Thor's breath turned to ice, Odin's shadow stretched across the ash-choked sky. A father's blade, a son's last gasp, a ritual as old as Yggdrasil's roots. What god or frost giant could have guessed? The Allfather's hunger for truth was no mere obsession, it was a siege, a slow, methodical dismantling of his own pantheon. Tyr's severed hand did not symbolize honor, it was a key, a cipher carved from bone and betrayal. Fimbulwinter's first snowflake was a whisper, the second a warning, the third a cage. Odin's ravens did not merely watch, they recorded the price of every secret torn from the well of Erd. Recorded the when he price of every secret drowned torn from the well of Erd. Mimir's head in the roots of the world tree, he did not mourn, he calculated. How many gods must burn to feed the fire of his vision? How many sons must die to forge a path through the veil? The battlefield at Ragnarok was no accident. It was a script. Thor, the storm's hammer raised to smite the serpent, did not see the shadow that moved behind him. Odin's hand, trembling with the weight of his own hubris, guided the strike that silenced his son. Tyr's empty sleeve hung like a banner of surrender, but surrender was the illusion. The real war raged in the unseen, a god sacrificing his kin to bind the fates of realms. What did Tyr know? What did he promise in the dark before his hand fell? Not peace, not glory. A pact written in the blood of futures erased. The Norns wove their threads, blind to the architect pulling the loom. When Fenrir's jaws closed, they did not chew flesh, they devoured possibility. Every Aesir who fell that day was a brick in Odin's pyramid. A monument to a truth too vast for any god to hold. The frost where Tyr was buried does not weep. It waits. A handless god's silence is not martyrdom, it is a countdown. The 9 realms tremble not from Ragnarok's end, but from the war that never truly began. The Santa Monica saga carves the Norns from its tapestry, a deliberate omission or a silent admission. Tyr's severed hand, long framed as a covenant with fate, now hangs hollow. Without the Norns, what binds his sacrifice to prophecy? The game's structure clings to Eddic roots, yet uproots their architects. If Tyr's pact was never with the weavers of threads, then who or what did he serve? The answer festers in the gap between myth and rewrite, a red herring or a betrayal masked by tradition. The gods' silence deepens. Their war against Fenrir was never about loyalty, it was a stage for a greater unmaking. Tyr's handlessness, a cipher, not a seal on destiny but a crack in its foundation. The 9 realms choke on this truth. The enemy was never the Jtnr, the enemy was the story itself. And Tyr, its first casualty or its architect, the countdown continues. Tyr's hand did not fall to Fenrir's jaws, it fell to Odin's blade. The wound was not a sacrifice, it was a cipher. Odin bound Tyr in chains not for cowardice, but for defiance. Tyr refused to tighten the Aesir's grip on the Niflheim veil, the membrane between broken worlds. So Odin took his hand, then took his name. During Ragnarok's chaos, the Allfather wore Tyr's face like a mask, feeding lies to the wolf, lies to the gods. Tyr's sacrifice was a key turned in a lock unseen, his imprisonment a vault for what was buried there, the veil's location. The realm between realms, where time folds on itself, where the 9 realms' threads could be rewoven. Tyr, handless and silent, let Odin play the martyr, let him believe the veil was hidden. But Tyr's pact was not with the Norns, it was with the void beyond them. When the chains broke, when Tyr walked free, his empty sleeve did not tremble, it pointed toward the veil, toward the rewrite. Odin's war was never against Fenrir, it was against the truth that Tyr had already won. The 9 realms would not fall. They would become something older, something unspoken. The gods fought shadows, Tyr had already swallowed the light. The pact was not with Fenrir, but with the void beyond his fangs. Tyr saw the Allfather's lies coiled in the roots of Yggdrasil, saw how Odin's wisdom was a hunger that devoured truth to fuel its fire. When the wolf's jaws snapped shut, Tyr's handlessness became a key, a lock broken on a prison older than the well of Erd. Odin's inevitable Ragnarok was a script written in ash, a lie to cage the realms in cyclical decay. Tyr's sacrifice was no choice. It was a wound that bled prophecy white. The Aesir fell as they had always fallen, blind. Odin, clinging to his stolen visions, could not comprehend a god who traded myth for fact. Tyr's silence in the storm was not courage, it was the weight of knowing. The 9 realms trembled not at divine reckoning, but at the first breath of honesty since the well's waters began to rot. What does a god become when his truth drowns in the lies that built his world? Tyr's name is erased even now, his story twisted into a parable of martyrdom, but the realms remember the cost. They remember the handless god who unmade a universe of pretense, only to find no hand left to shape what came after. The light he swallowed turned to dust. The pact was not with the Norns, it was with oblivion. And in that silence the 9 realms learned to breathe, without him. What if the prophecy's silence holds more than omissions? Beneath the realm between realms shifting sands, a nameless pact festers. Tyr's handlessness was not an end but a key. What else did Odin carve from fate's script? The next secret waits where shadows swallow light. Listen. Tyr's hand was not a gift, it was a lock. The realm between realms does not open to force-it waits for a key forged in god blood. The handless god did not die as a martyr. He fell as a traitor to the very war the gods believed they were fighting. What did he trade his limb for? A door left ajar for the true enemy. The 9 realms breathed because a god let them suffocate. The pact was not with oblivion, it was a leash, and Odin, blind to the snare, called it sacrifice. The hidden truth festers in the silence between beats of the world tree. What did Tyr hide in that gap? What did he bury when he let Fenrir's jaws close? The answer is not in the Eddas. It is in the shadow of the door he left open. Was his death a betrayal?